Governor, what can our leaders take from the Reagan playbook that could help us with today's challenges?
Sticking to convictions. The most remarkable thing about Ronald Reagan was he knew what he believed, he knew why he believed it, and he stuck to it. He understood that there's a time to compromise the methods, the timing, but you don't compromise your core convictions and your values. And people, whether they agreed with him or not, knew that he stood for some things and that he stood on some things unflinchingly. That's what made him a great leader, a great president, and it's also what was the primary, I think, force behind the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union. He understood the power of freedom in the human heart, and he also understood that America doesn't get strong by even announcing itself to be weak.
Some have commented that the ideals President Reagan stood for, smaller government to lower taxes to self-reliance, have had their day. Do you agree? And if not, why not?
I think the founders would be awfully surprised to hear that, because that's what the country was founded on. If you look at the early documents, where there's the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, the writings of our leaders and founders, those were exactly the principles that they believed in most. They knew they were taking extraordinary risk to create this country, but they also knew that with the risk came the rewards, and without one you can't have the other. What President Reagan embodied was a revival and a renewal of that understanding that the great rewards that America has afforded its citizens come only because Americans are willing to take great risk and because they are willing to accept the responsibility for themselves and their families, their neighborhoods, and that the last resort, the very last resort, would be the federal government.
What is the single most important decision you feel President Reagan made during his presidency that has withstood the test of time and benefits Americans today?
I think it was the decision to, from all historical accounts, ignore the advice of many of his closest advisors around him and stand up and make the speech in which he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear this wall down." It was a crowning moment in freedom, not just in his presidential career, but a crowning moment in freedom. He had the courage, let me be a little more maybe urbane, he had the guts to just stand up and say what every American, and I think what every freedom-loving person in the world deeply felt. It would have been easy for him to have maybe approached that with a greater sense of what I'd call conventional diplomacy. But instead he knew that candor and honesty was so much more effective. And this world is a better and a safer place because Ronald Reagan stuck to his convictions and listened to his own heart and listened to his conscience more than he just listened to a bunch of counselors.
It's been 20 years since Ronald Reagan has left the Oval Office. And what would you say to the millennials or the next generation about Ronald Reagan, what they can learn, knowing that he's someone from the past? How can they relate to someone today?
I encourage them to read his speeches. Read what he said. And as you read it, ask yourself, does this not ring true in your heart? I'm afraid sometimes people might read a history book, and the history books and the commentaries will likely give an interpretation of what they want you to believe Ronald Reagan said and what he stood for. Forget all that. Go straight to the source. And the millennials are a generation that are pretty good at sort of finding their own source material. This is a great challenge. Go to the source, unfiltered, unencumbered. Read the speeches, listen to them, watch them on video, and tell me if what he's saying does not resonate with what you know in your heart of hearts to be the truth. He is his best spokesman, and no one sells it better than he does because it rings true to the human heart.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.